everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my second ever book haul. If you've been here for quite a while, you might remember that back in August I did a July book haul, which I will link up above, but I actually ended up buying so many books in July with the excitement of being a booktuber going to my head that I put myself on a book buying ban. And I was really good, guys. I didn't buy any books in August, I didn't buy any books in September, I didn't buy any books in October, and then my birthday's at the end of the month, so in November I bought some books as like a birthday present to myself, but I've bought half as many books as I've read since I last bought any books. I think I'm still doing a pretty good job of not continuing to bring in books faster than I can read them. The first book I picked up is The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. This is a novel about 4 female scientists in the 1960s who invent time travel, but just as the project is about to be completed, one of them has a nervous breakdown of some sort and is sort of completely removed from the project to not put it at risk. Then we jump to, I think, about the present day, where time travel is a huge booming industry, and an elderly woman receives a newspaper clipping from the future about an old woman being murdered. This woman's granddaughter knows that maybe her grandmother had something to do with the invention of time travel, but she doesn't really know what. And she's worried now that this newspaper clipping is a warning that her grandmother might be murdered in the future. So of course she tries to stop this. I don't remember where I first saw this recommended, but as soon as I saw it, it sounded amazing and it went straight on my to-buy list because the premise sounds so cool. It sounds like science fiction and also murder, and also it's gonna mess with my head trying to keep track of what's going on here. I think it's gonna be incredible. I also picked up Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. I feel like I'm one of the last people on booktube to read this, but I just never got around to buying it for some reason over the summer, and then I was on a book buying ban, so obviously I wasn't buying it then, but I knew it had to be on my birthday haul because I am so excited about this one. I'm not totally sure if it's a novel or a series of 12 interwoven short stories. I've sort of heard a bit of both. But essentially it's 12 stories, each following a different character. And the various characters will have one story where they're the center, but then they might show up in the background of other stories, and then I think at the end all of it sort of comes together. I don't want to bias my assessment of this too much, but I think this is going to be a 5-star read. I mean, I give a lot of 5 stars, so that's not super hard to achieve, but between all of the praise I have heard from this and how much everyone has loved it, and the fact that the concept and the premise sounds like something I will adore, I'm just so excited to read this book. I also picked up The Witch, A History of Fear from Ancient Time to the Present by Ronald Hutton. This is, as the title says, an international history of witchcraft through time. And I think both what people were practicing as witchcraft and also what people perceived as witchcraft, maybe, I'm not too sure. I saw this book on Brittany of Literarily Smitten's channel. I think it was on her October TBR. I saw it between her recommendation, even if she hadn't even read it yet, and the title alone, I was sold. This sounds like a book that I'm going to love. I've also picked up The Girl with the Louding Voice by Daré. This is set in Nigeria, and it's the story of a 14-year-old girl who would really like to continue her studies and continue to get an education, but her father sells her to an older man as a third wife. Then she, I think, runs away from her husband and finds herself working as a servant to a wealthy family, and really just in a lot of awful situations from what I can tell. But throughout all of this, she continues to fight for her right to be heard and her right to speak up for herself and for other girls in her situation. I've seen this one around for a few months now, and it sounds like it's going to be a difficult read in the sense of emotionally hard to read, but it also sounds like it's really incredible, so I couldn't pass this one up. I also picked up The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. This is about 4 teenage siblings who are told by a fortune teller when they're all going to die. Then I think this novel looks at them throughout their lives following that moment, seeing where they end up and what choices they make based on when they believe they're going to die. So I don't know because I haven't read it yet, but I think the sort of thought of, well, if you know you're going to die when you're 28, you probably live your life in your 20s very differently to someone who knows that they're going to live to 80. This was a pure concept buy. You guys know me. I love stuff like this. It sounds like it's going to be so fascinating to read and so fascinating to think about and just really make me mull it over and contemplate things in general. Next, I bought Every Word is a Bird We Teach to Sing, Encounters with the Mysteries and Meanings of Language by Daniel Tammet. This is a collection of essays about language in general, and I think about many parts of language, so different ways different languages work, different ways language works in ways we don't necessarily always think about, like sign language or how translation between languages works. I picked this one up because Lana from Lana Ex Libris recommended it, and then in talking about it we decided we were going to do a buddy read of it in November for Nonfiction November. When I'm filming this, I'm about to start it either today or tomorrow, and then by the time you're seeing this, we will already have had our discussion about it. Hopefully, future Rosie, who's answering your comments, loves it absolutely as much as present Rosie hopes she will. At this point in my buying, I realized I was buying a lot of new books, but also there's a lot of series where I've read the first book and I haven't gotten to the next yet. So I also bought 3 sequels. The first of those is Wyntertide by Andrew Caldecott. This is the sequel to Rotherweird, and in Rotherweird we discover a strange town that's been completely detached from the rest of England's history and sort of progress since the Elizabethan era. So they've sort of, the timelines sort of diverged, and they've been progressing through time in parallel without much contact between them. Until in Rotherweird, a history teacher arrives to teach modern history and starts to question why no one is allowed to know about or talk about ancient history. It actually hasn't been that long since I read the first book. It was at the beginning of this year, I think. But I remember that there was a big intrigue and sort of mystery that they were solving in the first book that got wrapped up at the end of that. And then I don't know exactly what happens in the second one. From the blurb, I get the idea that maybe there's more going on than people thought at first. And of course, it's a series, so I'm sure the whole story wasn't wrapped up in the first book. But I loved discovering what was happening in the first book, so I'm actually not even that upset about going into the second without knowing what happens at all, because figuring it out was part of the enjoyment of this book. I mean, that's the case for most books, right? But especially in this one, it was very mysterious and very unclear what was going on, and it was really well written, so I'm so excited about this. The next sequel I bought was Penric and the Shaman by Lois McMaster Bujold, which is the second book in the Penric and Desdemona series. These are novellas about a young man named Penric who finds himself suddenly possessed by a demon, not in like a bad way. In this world, demon possession is how sorcerers gain their power. It's usually reserved for people who have spent years training and working their way up through the religious system, but Penric hasn't done any of that. It's totally random and unexpected and accidental. So the first book is sort of him getting a hold of that, and then I think in this one he's a bit more established, and he's sent out to help some other religious person with some task or mission. I'm sure intrigue will follow. I loved the first book when I read it over the summer. I will link the reading vlog where I discuss it up above. I think this one's going to be awesome as well. I don't want to commit myself too much, but I highly suspect that I'm going to read this one next weekend in my birthday reading vlog, so stay tuned for that. And this last sequel I bought was Dreadful Company by Vivian Shaw. This is the second Dr. Greta Helsing novel. The first one, Strange Practice, I read over the summer just before I started my channel, I think, like maybe a month before. In that one, Dr. Greta Helsing, who is a doctor to the undead, so not in a curing them of their undeadness, but like curing their illnesses way, and she finds herself in the middle of a plot involving a lot of ritualistic murders of the undead in London and has to figure that out. In this one, from the blurb, she travels to Paris for a medical conference of medical issues of the undead, I guess, and finds herself contending with a group of totally uncivilized vampires who are, I'm sure, raising some sort of havoc on Paris. I would have raved about Strange Company had I read it just a month or two later, so I'm so looking forward to reading this one and probably talking about it so much on here because I just thought the first was so delightful, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into this world. I thought it was a really interesting, really wonderful world that I really enjoyed reading about. I also, of course, had to pick up a few more non-fiction titles. The first of those is Hotbox: Inside Catering, the Food World's Riskiest Business by Matt Lee and Ted Lee. This is written by a pair of brothers who are, I think, chefs. And in order to write this book, they spent years sort of working in the catering business and observing how the catering business worked in order to share it all with us. You guys know that I love logistics, you guys know that I love weirdly niche information, and you guys know that I love food. I don't know where I saw this book or when, but it's been on my to-buy list for ages, and I thought it sounded like the perfect thing to pick up. I honestly don't know much more than what I've just told you, but based on that alone, I knew that it was going to be something that at worst I'll find interesting, and at best is going to be amazing and so much fun to read. The last nonfiction I picked up for this haul is A Place Apart: Northern Ireland in the 1970s by Dervla Murphy. Dervla is an Irish woman who, at the time of writing this in the 70s, was in her 40s and had only ever spent 36 hours in Northern Ireland. So she decided at the height of the Troubles that she was going to fix this, and she was going to go up there, travel around by bike, and just talk to people about it. And basically, I think, meet up with people in bars. She talks to people on both sides of the conflict. I've read a couple of her books before, and I really liked both of them, but for some reason, I'm always hesitant to pick up another one. I think I have this fear that it's going to let me down, or it's not going to be as amazing as the first two that I've read by her, but that's silly. And also, after reading Say Nothing back in September, I will link my wrap-up up here. I'm so intrigued to read more about the Troubles and that conflict in general, so this sounds like a super interesting perspective on it. This next book was sort of a last-minute addition to my haul, and it's The Penelopiad. I can't pronounce that for some reason, I'm so sorry, by Margaret Atwood. This is the story of Penelope, Odysseus' wife, and her story of the Odyssey and what was going on with her while Odysseus was making his great 10-year journey home and all of that. From what I understand, it's told from the afterlife, so this sounds so interesting. Honestly, I've never been a really big Margaret Atwood fan. I think it's because the books I've read from her were The Handmaid's Tale, and I tried to read Oryx and Crake, but they're both dystopian, and I just really don't like dystopian. I don't know if I've talked about it much on my channel before, but pretty much all dystopian just makes me feel really, really anxious, and that's not something I like from books. If my mom is watching this, I'm sure she's sitting there shaking her head and wondering at how she raised a daughter who doesn't like Atwood, but I'm really hoping that this book will be the one that changes that. It sounds like it's amazing. I first saw it recommended by Jean of Jean Bookish Thoughts, and then Lana of Lana Ex Libris did a vlog where she read books that were recommended to her by Jean's videos, so after she raved about it, I knew I had to pick this one up and actually went and bought it while watching her video. The next few books I bought are actually ones that I have physical copies of, and that's because they're comic bind-ups. The first couple I got are Saga Volume 8 and Saga Volume 9. This is so hard. How do you guys do this? I'm just gonna put photos up while I talk about them because there's no way I can just sit here and hold them. I got so distracted by holding those up for you that I forgot to say. Saga is by Brian Vaughan and the art is by Fiona Staples. This is, if you don't know, a saga about a man and a woman from two different alien races that have been at war with each other for a really long time, I think. They meet when one of them's a prisoner of war and the other's a guard, they fall in love, and then they run away together. Of course, both of their race's big powers are really upset and trying to hunt them down and kill them because they sort of think, well, if people know that we're not that different, we can, breed between us. They have a kid, there's nothing innate about our hatred for each other, then that's going to cause problems with this war that they're waging. These are, as far as I know, the last two published volumes, and I don't think there's going to be any more soon. But honestly, I have no idea what's going on at this point because even though I own through Volume 7, according to Goodreads, I haven't read past Volume 5. So I think I'm going to have to read a brief summary and then do a binge catch-up on these because I've loved all the volumes I read so far, even if it's been a while, and I really want to finish the story as it stands. I also picked up Lumberjanes Volume 3, A Terrible Plan, and Lumberjanes Volume 4, Out of Time. I'm going to read who this is by because there are so many. This is by Noelle Stevenson and Shannon Waters with art by Carolyn Nowak and Brooke Allen. It's been forever since I read volumes 1 and 2 of Lumberjanes, but from what I remember, it's a group of very badass girls at a very badass Girl Guides-esque camp, I think. And if I remember correctly, there's mysteries and also possibly magic and quests, and it was really cool. I want to reread volumes 1 and 2, read volume 3 and 4, and then decide if it's something that I still love now. Because like I said, it's been probably, like, I read the first 2 volumes when they came out, and I think that was like 5 years ago. So there's like 14, 15, 16 volumes total now, and I want to read these 4, get a sense of like, am I enjoying this enough to make the investment to buy the next 10 volumes? Or if it's something where it's like, well, I enjoyed these ones, but they're not something I want to continue. I have a suspicion I'll want to keep reading them because I don't see how my tastes can have changed so much that I won't love these as much now as I did back then. You guys are going to be sick of hearing me talk about this next one, but it's not one that I had yet. It's Death in Dalesford by Carrie Greenwood. It's the 21st Miss Fisher murder mystery novel. I know I've talked to death about Phryne lately, but like, I've just really needed her in my life. As I said, this is the 21st book in the series. I think in this one, Phryne receives an invitation to visit like a health spa in the countryside. And of course, when she throws up, people start dying. Not because of her, but like, that's why she's been invited or something. This is the first time that a new book in this series has been released since I started to read it. So as soon as I saw that it was coming out, I knew I had to pre-order it. It'll be a great like half birthday gift for myself next June. And speaking of Phryne, been kind of bad, and I picked up physical copies of Cocaine Blues, Flying Too High, God, that's so much glare, and Murder on the Ballarat Train. These are, of course, all by Carrie Greenwood. They're all Phryne Fisher novels. They're physical copies of the first 3 books, which I've read multiple times. If you saw my reread tag, I will link that up here in case you haven't, but like, I love these books so much. And I've been thinking for years that I want to build a physical collection of them all, just to have, because like, even though I mostly read ebooks, I do eventually want to have a very, very curated collection of books that really just represent my absolute favorites. I'm supposed to be waiting until I'm living somewhere more permanently and not going to move again soon to start buying those books, because books are awful to move. And also I'm out of bookshelf space at this apartment, so like, I don't know where these are gonna go. I have to completely reorganize everything. I got so caught up in supporting my local independent bookstore that I couldn't resist, and I'm so excited to have this little start to my collection, even if it's gonna be years before I add any more on. Alright, that's all the books. That wasn't so bad, was it? Like, given that I hadn't bought any books since July, I think that's pretty reasonable. And realistically, I'm probably not going to buy any more until at least next year sometime, so it's okay. I'm telling myself it's okay. If you have read any of these, please let me know down below what you thought of them. If there are any that you're particularly excited to hear my thoughts on, please also let me know down below, because I'm now faced with this problem of like, I've got a huge TBR of books that I already owned that I'm desperate to read. I've got this whole list of books that I just bought that I really want to read, and I've only got so much time in the day. So any help prioritizing would be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, including hopefully wrap-ups where I talk about these fairly soon, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching!